Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. We're going to go across to a speech by the French president who is inaugurating French Language Cultural Institute.
Ladies and gentlemen, in your respective titles, dear friends, I must say that this has been something that I have waited for some time, and I'm greatly happy to be here today. I wanted to invite here today all those people who changed my life, all the authors who had an impact on my life and left me with great memories. Some of our greatest authors that now appear in the Pléiade collection, who are part of our own most personal pantheon. Countless fragrances, feelings, emotions that I lived through French literature before I lived them myself, that our very language gave me insight into before I could live them myself. The reason I am here today is to attempt to answer three simple questions. Why here today, in this very castle, are we creating the City of French Language, a museum of French language? Why does it make such sense to have it here? And third, what can the French language be in that it is so essential to each and every one of us? Here in the Aisne region, between the Aisne and the Oise rivers, in the Picardy region, which is a region so close to my heart, this venue became so important for me back 7 years ago during the presidential campaign. Jacques Brabal, I'm sure you remember, and a few others here today. We were walking down and we were standing there in a central square in front of the statue of Alexandre Dumas. First key fact, Alexandre Dumas was born here in this city. His father was a general of the empire, retired, son of a marquis sent out to Saint Domingo, was insolent, was disciplined, and ended up living with his own wife's fortunes. Racine also, Château-Thierry, where La Fontaine grew up. Such great names of the French language are tied to this very place, in this very venue, in this very castle. It is a place that is tied up not just to French literature, but also French politics. People, kings who came here to hunt, to write. Some even came here to pass away. This is a place that is very close to the hearts of many authors. Racine, Claudel, was inspired by this very venue. His writings and his very life are tied to this place. But it is quite clearly the epicenter of politics and literature in France. And back in March 2017, this castle was completely cut off from all life. The windows were boarded up, and the courtyard was in a great state of disrepair. So it was part of France's heritage that was on the brink of destruction. So I took a pledge to rebuild this venue, to bring back its bygone glory and beauty. This place, this castle, is one of the few castles that was actually reinvented by King Francis I. So he came back to France after traveling abroad, and it was in 1530 he made a decision to rebuild a number of,
Villers-Cotterets,
or to build a number of key places. Fontainebleau, Villers-Cotterets.
cousin de ce château,
Fontainebleau is almost a
Saint-Germain-en-Laye,
cousin of this very
le
castle.
Louvre, dans sa
Saint-Germain-en-Laye,
nouvelle
the
figure,
Louvre.
et donc
as
ici
well.
même, dans ce qu'il appelait lui-même mon plaisir,
It is what
les travaux
he
sont
called
lancés au début
places
des
that
années
were part of his
1530, et ce
own
lieu
pleasure.
deviendra un lieu de chasse régulière,
And this
de
place
séjour
would
régulier
become a
et de
hunting
gouvernement.
ground
Et
for
donc,
his own
en
leisure
effet,
activities,
dans ce
but
lieu
later
où,
a place where he would
imaginez,
hold government.
Rabelais, Clément Marot,
But when we look at the writings of Rabelais and Clément Marot, they also came here to spend
François Ier
time.
vient chasser et
And
gouverne.
King Francis I
Henri
came
II
here to
adore
hunt
Molière,
and to govern.
dit-on, y donne, certains y ont fait référence. Molière y donne Tartuffe.
Molière actually spoke
Louis
of this in
XIV.
Tartuffe.
Puis, au moment
Louis
de l'an
XIV.
2, cela devient une caserne pour soldats.
It
Et le
then later on
consul
became
Bonaparte décide d'en faire un asile pour les mendiants.
a
Puis, à travers
barracks
les
for
âges, le lieu
soldiers,
devient hospice,
a
commandant
refuge
durant la
for
Deuxième Guerre
homeless people.
mondiale.
It became a
Il
hospice
redevient
during
un
the First
lieu de
World War,
solidarité
and it became a
pour les
venue for
sans-abri
signs
âgés
of
durant
solidarity
plusieurs décennies,
for
avant de tomber
numerous
progressivement
decades.
à l'abandon.
And then, bit by
Et
bit,
l'abandon
it
fut
fell
complet
into a state of
En
disrepair and
2014,
was
même si
abandoned.
une partie du bâtiment fut
Even in
abandonnée
2014,
bien des années plus tôt.
there were
Ce lieu,
a
vous l'avez
few
compris, à
final
travers l'histoire,
remnants
ne méritait qu'une chose,
of people passing through here.
c'était
But
d'être
this
ranimé. Il est au
building
cœur de ce pays
was
de
in
Valois que
great
j'évoquais,
need
de cette
of being
forêt
brought
d'Orez,
back
qui
to
était
life.
elle aussi un bijou du patrimoine naturel.
as
Il nous
a
fallait donc restaurer ce trésor
as
de notre
well as the
patrimoine, mais en
forest
quelque
around
sorte,
it, which
en le
was part
restaurant,
of France's own
lui
natural
redonnant
heritage.
sa vocation.
So we had to bring this venue
Or,
back
celle-ci,
into what it was meant to be.
Sa voix, au sens propre du terme,
It was a place
est notre langue.
where we could cherish
Toujours
our language and hear
comme
the
dans ce
French
pays, au
voice.
croisement de l'aventure littéraire et politique.
And because this is a place where we see
si en
the
effet
crossings
François Ier a
of
pris
politics
cette
and
décision
literature. So when
architecturale,
King Francis
il a
I
ici
wanted
aussi
to
pris
undertake building
un
this
acte
place,
éminemment
it was
important,
also
cette
him
ordonnance
taking a
d'août
key
1539.
decision in
L'un des textes juridiques les plus anciens que l'on retrouve
when he created one of the most emblematic
et dans le
legal
parcours
texts of
ici
French
décidé, l'un des
legal
textes
history,
juridiques les plus anciens
one of the
en
oldest
vigueur en France. Et François Ier
legal
ici,
text that is still in
décide
act today.
ainsi
And it was when he
d'imposer que
decided
tous les actes
to say that
du
all
royaume fussent
legal
désormais
documents
prononcés,
within the Kingdom of
enregistrés,
France would be
délivrés,
written,
je cite
recorded, and
l'ordonnance, aux
issued
parties, en
to
langage
all
maternel
parties
français
in their
et
mother
non
tongue,
autrement,
French, and in no other
c'est-à-dire
language.
non plus en latin.
In other words, it was to say
Savoir
that
si cette
Latin would
expression
no
de
longer be
langage
the
maternel français
language of law.
désignait le français uniquement ou englober
So
d'autres langues
France,
maternelles de la France
and
d'alors
so the
est un
French
débat de
language
spécialistes dans lequel je ne
became so
me
omnipresent.
hasarderai pas. Mais le français devient alors,
French,
par cette ordonnance,
through that decree,
la langue
became
de nos lois, de nos
the
textes,
language
la langue
of
de
our
la
laws,
justice,
of justice,
et elle devient alors
and as such,
symboliquement
it
et
became
réellement ouverte à la
symbolically and
compréhension de tous, et
in
non plus
concrete
réservée
terms,
simplement
a language of
aux
all.
clercs et aux lettrés.
It was no longer just the language
Égalité,
used by the literate.
Règles communes.
Shared
10 ans
laws,
plus tard, 10 ans
shared
à peine,
rules. And
Joachim
10 years
du Bellay,
after that,
dans sa
Joachim de
défense et
Bellay,
illustration de la langue française,
in
allait mener le combat,
defending
mais elle
the
menait
power
le
of the French
combat, si je
language,
puis dire,
he waged
au
a war.
contact
He
réel,
waged a
en expliquant que cette
war
langue
in
n'était pas
that
la langue des
he was saying
barbares et
the
qu'elle
French
avait
language
quelques mérites, y
is
compris par
no
rapport
longer
au
just
grec et
a
au latin,
language spoken by the barbarians
conduisant
or
à
spoken
nouveau
by
une
the
de
hoi
ces
polloi. It
aventures
was a
entre
language that was on the same footing
les
as
anciens
Latin
et
and
les
ancient
modernes.
Greek. It was a
Ça,
way of
l'aventure de la
joining
langue
both the
française.
ancient world and the
Et elle
modern
fut toujours
world, and that
animée
is the
par ces
beauty
tensions.
of French.
Et durant 5
As a
siècles,
language,
le
then,
français s'est
as it is
imposé
now.
progressivement.
And bit by bit,
Langue du royaume,
French language
langue
became the
forgeant
language
la
of the
nation,
kingdom,
puis langue de
a
la
language
République,
to found nations, and
jusqu'à sa
then the language of the
consécration en
republic,
1992
right
dans notre
through
Constitution, puis la loi, cher Jacques Toubon, qui
to
allait en
when
défendre
Jacques Toubon
l'importance dans nos textes et
defended the
usages.
importance of using French in
Aussi,
all legal documents
faire
once again.
revivre ce lieu devait
So
nous conduire,
bringing life back into
comme
this
par une
place,
évidence,
it is bringing us back
à en
to
faire un lieu
almost the
dédié
origins,
aux Français,
a space
à notre
dedicated
langue
to French
et à
speakers,
l'aventure de celle-ci.
to the French,
En fidélité
our
à
language,
l'ordonnance
and
de
to what makes us unique.
1539 et à ce Valois si essentiel dans notre
paying
littérature,
tribute to the decree from
et en nous embarquant
1539
jusqu'aujourd'hui à travers l'histoire et
right
les continents
through
pour le faire vivre.
to where we are today, where French is now a language spoken across all continents.
Alors, maintenant, que sera ce lieu? cette cité
So what will this
internationale
place
de la
now
langue
become?
française que
This
vous allez pouvoir
international
découvrir dans
city
quelques
for the
instants.
French language, this museum for the French language.
À partir de 2017 a commencé
In
un
2017,
chantier inédit.
we started works on
23 000
creating this
mètres
museum.
carrés, 265
23,000
000
square
ardoises, des
meters
milliers de pierres de taille,
of floor
aux
space that
mains
need to be refurbished,
de
roofing
plusieurs
that needed
dizaines
to be refurbished,
d'entreprises, 600 compagnons
countless
coiffés d'une verrière
construction
unique en son
companies
genre.
and renovation companies,
Ce projet a été voulu
artisans
comme
working
exemplaire.
to renovate this
Exemplaire
building.
par son efficacité,
And they did an
et sa
exemplary
durabilité,
job in doing
comme on
so,
dit.
in doing it in such short
Preuve
time.
aussi que les délais courts ne détournent pas du temps long. Les clauses d'insertion sociale ont permis de recruter
Because thanks to
150
everything that
salariés locaux
what we
et
did
de
on this side, we were
réaliser
able
plus de
to
90 000
employ
heures d'insertion.
some 500 young
Exemplaire aussi dans
employees
sa
seeking
volonté
jobs.
d'être au service des Cotterésiens.
We were able to create
Que
jobs
cela reste
for the
leur
local
diamant dans la forêt,
populations.
pour reprendre les mots de l'une d'entre vous.
And this castle, like a
Celui qui a
diamond in
toujours
the
veillé
forest,
sur les
as it was
promenades,
once
les
written
pique-niques
about,
et les premières
it
romances
is now a
qu'abritait son
place
parc.
where people can
Jusqu'ici,
come
il est
for
veillé
picnics
derrière
and
des grands
enjoy the
murs,
forest.
comme je le disais, ils vous sont désormais ouverts.
Because these castle walls are now open to all.
C'est un lieu aussi unique car jamais une
This
institution
space
n'avait
is
été
quite a
consacrée
unique space
à l'histoire de notre langue.
because
Aucun projet
nowhere
culturel
before
porté par un
has there
président
ever
de
been a
cette
space
ampleur n'avait
dedicated
encore
to the
été
history and
implanté
beauty
en
of
dehors
our
de
French
Paris.
language.
Et
Never
jamais
before
de tels
outside of Paris
investissements
has such
n'avaient
a venue
bénéficié
ever
en matière de
existed.
culture au département de l'Aisne.
And never
bien
before
une
has the Ain region received
pas un
such a
musée.
cultural program, because this
Car
is
le
more
parcours
than just a
permanent s'enrichit de
museum.
lieux de vie, de
There
rencontres, de
is
loisirs et
a
de savoir où
permanent
se tiendront des
itinerary that
formations, des
people can
ateliers, des
take as part
résidences
of a visit,
d'artistes, des
where they
chercheurs, un
will
auditorium,
explore
un
the French
laboratoire de
language. There is a
technologie
laboratory, a
linguistique.
research center,
Chacun doit s'y sentir chez lui.
and each and every person who walks
Ceci
through
a
our
été
doors.
possible et je veux en remercier les
is at
principaux
home.
artisans. Parce que
I would like
il y
to
a eu
make
une
a
alliance
quick mention
extraordinaire de
of the
beaucoup de
craftsmen
force.
who worked on this site, because they
D'abord,
did not just a fantastic job,
l'ensemble des
they
équipes
did much more
du
than that.
ministère de la Culture, Madame la
It is
ministre,
thanks to the teams of the Ministry of
et
Culture
je veux remercier vos
under our
prédécesseurs,
minister,
l'ensemble de vos
both current
équipes, vous-même.
and past.
Remercier tout
I'd like
particulièrement
to
également
thank you for all of the work
l'équipe
that
du Centre des Monuments
you
nationaux,
did
sous la
working
houlette d'abord
with
de
the
Philippe
National
Delaval,
Monuments with Philippe
puis de Marie
Delaval
Lavandier,
and then
et
Marie
l'ensemble de
Lavandier
leurs équipes.
and all of their
Paul
teams.
Rondin,
Paul
Xavier
Rondin,
Bailly,
Xavier
Nord,
Bailly,
commissaire
Xavier
principal
Nord,
du parcours, Barbara Cassin,
Barbara Cassin,
Zef Gourarière,
Zef Gourarière, Hassan
les co-commissaires,
Koussoyer,
M. De Cinetti, qui a joué un rôle
Mr.
aussi important,
De Signetti,
tant d'autres en lien
and
avec
so
le
many
ministère de la
others who worked
Culture,
with the Ministry of Culture,
l'Organisation internationale de la
the
francophonie,
International
main dans la
Organization
main,
for Francophone
avec
Countries.
beaucoup de ceux que j'évoquais. Olivier Vez,
All of those people,
architecte en
Olivier
chef
Vez,
des monuments
lead
historiques,
architect for
l'agence
historical
projetique qui a
monuments,
aménagé et conçu la scénographie et
the
la
firm that
signalétique,
worked on coming up with all of
côté de
the
beaucoup
signage.
d'entreprises partenaires.
So many
Mais également
companies who were
les
partner
élus du territoire,
to the success of this
Monsieur le
building,
maire,
but also
Monsieur le président de la
local
communauté de
representatives,
communes,
the local mayors,
Monsieur de Montesquieu, qui avait porté
Mr.
le
Montesquieu,
projet dès le
who
début. Monsieur le
championed this
président,
project
cher Nicolas
right from the
Fricoteau,
outside. Nicolas Fricoteau,
pour le département, Monsieur le président de la
represented the
région, cher
department,
Xavier
the
Bertrand,
Xavier
et
Bertrand,
cher François
president
de Coster,
of
votre
the department
vice-président en charge
and
de la
vice president
culture,
in charge of culture.
le service de l'État, le préfet
All
de l'Aisne, et
people
le comité de
working
pilotage,
for
tous
the
les
local
élus.
government and regional and
territoire, cher
department
Jacques.
governments.
Krabal, en évoquant
Thank
le
you
rôle
all for
important
everything that
que
you
vous
have
avez
done.
joué dès le début, ont été
Many
associés,
right
ont
from
pensé
the
ce
outset,
lieu, et vont
because
continuer
many
de
of
le penser,
you
car
saw what
ce n'est
this
qu'un
place
début.
could become. But this is
La
just a
forêt qui est
beginning.
là a abrité
The forest
à coup sûr
around us
l'imaginaire des aventures des Trois Mousquetaires,
was
et de
clearly
Loupiac à Maastricht, ce lieu est aussi
part of what inspired the
sur
Three
la
Musketeers,
dorsale des aventures de Dumas et de ses épopées françaises.
that inspired Dumas.
Rien n'aurait été
with his
possible aussi
great
sans la
tales.
participation de tous les opérateurs de l'Organisation
None of this would have been
internationale
possible
de la
without
francophonie,
all of the
chers
support from the International Organization
le
for
soutien
Francophone
humain et
speaking countries
financier de partenaires
and the
généreux
support
du monde entier,
of dear
au premier
Louise,
rang desquels le gouvernement du
the
Québec,
chairwoman of the
qui ont
organization.
montré combien le français était un bien
All
commun.
of you work to show just
Ensemble,
how
vous avez
important
façonné
French as a
une
language
prouesse
is and how it is
architecturale,
part
muséale,
of
pédagogique,
our common
que nous allons
wealth.
continuer de faire grandir,
And
surtout de faire
as I said, this is
vivre.
just beginning,
Vous
because
avez
we are going to
exploité le
continue
meilleur du
to bring this
numérique
place
et de
alive. Thanks to
l'immersif,
everything that you have
remonter le
done and
temps,
are going to do,
collecter nos
we are going to
expressions
show
et
that this place can
régionalismes,
leverage
adapter
everything that the
votre discours à tous
digital
les
world
publics,
can
rendu
offer
palpable l'immatériel,
to
mis
bring
des
the
mots
immaterial
sur ce qui
to
échappe aux
life,
mots, justement une
to
langue,
bring
son
words
histoire,
to life,
sa
because a
spécificité,
language,
ses
its
paradoxes.
history, what makes it so
Et
unique.
ce lieu sera évidemment en lien avec tous ceux de la
And this
région,
venue will work with other venues
avec tous les
around
autres
the
lieux
local
d'ailleurs
region.
de
with Château-Thierry, Pierrefonds as well. There is quite a vast array of places that this site will interact with the National Library, with the National Press, the National Organization for Books. It will continue to work with the chateau to again champion the French language. So this project is about our heritage, about bringing life back to our heritage. But more than just the language is also the architectural history, with the Jeu de Paume, with the main staircase, with the main courtyards, with their own architectural beauty. These places, which are so present in so many books, we can live them now through the tours that people will take as they go from one room to the next, from one word to the next, from one book to the next. This space is a space for teachers and students where they can come to learn, study French, where they can receive training in French, and training in French literature, a place for translators and artists, a place for shows and performances. Tonight there will be a performance. Now, obviously, there are performances that didn't wait for the official opening for the past few months. You have already been hosting numerous events and shows, bringing this place alive. So that answers the second question. What will this place be? But the third question is one which is much more important from a global point of view. Why speak of the French language? Why is the French language so important? Some would say that is it the right time? Some would say we shouldn't be doing this now. Some would say, it's just a pipe dream. Some would say, well, it shouldn't be in a museum because a museum's are tired and fusty. Well, it's not a museum, it's more than a museum, it is what we call a city of French language. So few other countries in the world have such a passionate debate about their own language, so thank you for that. Thank you for being part of this fantastic debate. We have the Academy, the French Language Academy, the cream of the crop. Why is it so important to speak of the French language and to champion it? Simply because the French language is what the unity of our nation is built upon. It's a language of liberty, freedoms, and universalism. And given the current world that we live in, this project takes on its full importance. To focus on our unity, at a time where the world is divided, where hatred is on the rise, where people are trying to spit some communities against others, religions against others, language can be there to cement us all together, to root us in the present. It is a way of understanding our relationship between us and the nation, between us and the French Republic. So to choose it, to speak it, means you are part of our nation. Because we are in a country that has adopted so many other authors from around the world, but we live in a country unified by our language. It is the very core of politics and the political decisions made by King Francis I back when he determined that French would be the language of law. The French language was a way of fighting off all of those outward forces trying to shake our nation. The French language, through the Academy, as the defenders of the French language. And I would just like to welcome you here once again, and everything you do, because what you do is you set the French language in stone. You make sure that we use the right words, that the words are used for the right purpose, as a way of fighting against misunderstanding, Because through what you do, we shape the unity of the kingdom in the past and the nation today. At the time of the French Revolution, French language was there. When we set down the unified meter, French language was there, and it normalized our world. It created us the right conditions so that we could build our world, build our nation in a sense of unity. The unity of the French Revolution, the French Republic, were possible thanks to the French language. Because what consolidates each part of a country? Our language. And it's up to our French teachers who can teach French and teach everything that we know through this language. There were times, even in recent French history, where even people who fought for France didn't speak the French language, but after they fought for France, they learned the French language, and therein they became citizens of our nation. Because we have a singular, strong, powerful language that can unite our country together. And yet, is it so simple to have just a language that can unify people to that extent? It is both changed and changing, it is set but moving. There are so many words, contrasting words, to describe our very language. People have often tried to define how specific the French language is, because it's highly specific. But it's the language spoken by Racine, by the Academy, by Rabelais, Mallarmé, and many others. People say that French is a language of being concise, a language of reason, through Ionesco, Queneau, and many others. Maybe we should stop trying to define how powerful the French language is by finding a singular definition, but by focusing on how plural it is. The language spoken by Corneille is the same language spoken by Baudelaire, by the Surrealists, by slam poets, by the greatest literary powers. It's a language that brings to life a blank page. For all those people who learnt the French language and who chose the French language are brought together by the very language that they chose or learnt. And then, on top of the language, you have the accents, you have the beautiful sounds of the south of France, the north of France, from the overseas territories, from the center of Paris. Our language reflects our traditions, our cultures, our mindsets, that are neither the same nor different. Yet what they are indivisible, like our republic, like our nation, a united nation that does not exclude others. Because we have vernacular, we have our patois, and they have to be able to live together in peace with 72 regional languages: Breton, Basque, Gascon, Provençal, Occitan, Catalan, Corsican, from Creole, Kanak, Polynesian dialects as well. A French speaker can actually belong to multiple linguistic communities, and we all have the right to speak our own language when we can. All languages are equal from a point of dignity, which is why we need to teach more and more our regional languages so that they can be seen more in the public arena. They are more than just providing regionalisms, they also provide a sense of cohesion at the national level. I actually wrote to Amin Malouf, spoken of this need for a language and an identity, how everyone has such a powerful need to feel that connection. But through this word, identity, we're not speaking of pitting one identity against another, but having one identity working with others to feed into a multiple whole. And that is where the power of French
Nous
comes
avons
in.
besoin de toutes ces langues et d'une langue qui soit
We
la
need
même,
all
de
these
Lille à
languages.
Nouméa, de Marseille à
We need a
Pointe-à-Pitre,
language to connect
pour
people
nous sentir
from Nouméa to
appartenir à la
Pointe-à-Pitre
même
to
entité
Paris,
nationale en nos différences,
to show that we can be a
Nous avons
nation
besoin du
through our
français.
differences.
pour former la France.
And for that we need
Elle est
French.
sa langue.
French
le
is the
riche
language of
legs
instruction.
déposé dans son oreille ses livres, ses lois par des
French is a language that
Il y aura
crosses
toujours de multiples
generations.
langues dans la République et
There will
une
always be
langue
multiple
de
languages
la
within the Republic, but there will also be a language
L'un des
of
traits
the
les plus
French
marquants
Republic.
dans l'histoire de la France est justement peut-être
Probably
ce
the most
travail puissant et
remarkable
permanent
fact about the
consacré par notre
history of
nation à
France
sa propre
is that we have a
formation,
nation that was
quête
built
d'elle-même par
up
elle-même à
by
travers les
and
mains de
of
ceux qui
itself
l'habitent
through
et
those
qui la
people who live in the nation
C'est
and who
pourquoi,
make that nation.
Dans quelques mois, quand
And that is why in just
la nouvelle
a
édition
few months,
de l'Académie
when the
française sortira,
new
ce sera un
edition
moment
of the
solennel
French
et important,
Academy's
car c'est un
book
moment de reconnaissance
will
dans notre
reflect
langue
the
des
fact
mots qui
that
sont
we
affectent
recognize the
la
importance
continuation
of
de la
these
force
languages
de notre
within
nation. Et c'est pour cela aussi
France.
qu'il faut permettre à cette langue de vivre, de s'inspirer
That's why we
des
need
autres,
to let
de voler des mots,
our
y compris à
language
l'autre bout
live,
du monde. J'y
inspire
reviendrai
itself
tout à l'heure,
from
de
others,
continuer à
draw on
inventer,
other languages, reinvent itself.
mais d'en garder aussi les fondements,
But while we
le
also
socle de sa
seek
grammaire, la
elsewhere
force de sa
to
syntaxe,
renew and keep our
et de
language
ne pas
alive, we also
céder
need to
aux airs
build
du
upon
temps.
the
Dans cette
groundwork,
langue,
the
le
bedrock of
masculin,
our
c'est
language.
neutre. On n'a pas besoin d'y rajouter des points au milieu des mots ou des tirets.
We
ou des choses
have
pour la rendre
our
lisible.
language. We don't need to reinvent grammar.
La France est une œuvre née de volonté,
France
volonté plurielle,
is-
contrastée, contraire parfois,
So French
bouillonnant dans
is
le grand
built
creuset
up
tricolore. On y lit tous ces
through
tiraillements,
years and years of
ceux d'un
toing and
peuple
froing.
à la forge de sa nation.
But this is the language of a people building its
C'est
nation
important, la langue.
in a sense of unity,
Et c'est important parce
unified
que
by their
chercher
language.
ce qui nous divise le plus.
Oftentimes people look to what
Ce qui
divises
fait
us,
que on peut
to
parfois
misunderstanding.
aller jusqu'au pire, monter jusqu'aux plus grandes tensions.
And sometimes
C'est
people
quand la langue
will
fait défaut.
push us
Lorsque les
to
malentendus
great
naissent et que les
heights of
quiproquos
stress and
deviennent des
tension
sujets de
between
conflit.
people.
Et
And the
plus
reason
encore,
we get to that stage is because we
lorsqu'on
cannot find the right
considère que
words.
La langue n'est plus l'expression des désaccords et que la violence peut se substituer.
And when words can no longer reflect
L'opportunité,
our differences, that's when violence comes in.
à commencer par la France. La deuxième raison, je l'évoquais, c'est que le français
The second reason that
est
I
la
wanted to
langue
speak
de
of is that
l'universalité.
France is a language
et la
of
liberté.
universalism and
Et
liberty.
dans le moment que nous vivons,
And in our current world,
c'est sans doute plus qu'utile de le rappeler.
I think this is a message that we
L'accent immortel de la langue
must
française, sa
remember.
vibration la plus intime, c'est sans doute la révolte
French
de la pensée
language
face à l'arbitraire.
Is a language of
L'effort
revolution,
d'insensibilité
of standing
vers
up against
C'est d'avoir
arbitrary
été
decisions.
la langue du doute cartésien,
It's a language
de la Déclaration
of
des droits
Cartesian
de l'homme
doubt,
et du
of the
citoyen,
Universal Declaration of Rights of
d'avoir
Man and
forgé le
Citizen,
traité sur la tolérance
of
et le dernier
J'accuse.
jour d'un
It was the
condamné.
language of the final
Il lui
day of the
restera toujours
condemned.
quelque chose dans son architecture.
There is always something
Comme une
about the French
facilité à
language
offrir ses résonances à la veuve,
that
l'orphelin et l'opprimé. Une
can
invitation à
provide a
prêter ses
voice
échos
to
au chant
widows, to
universel de la
orphans,
liberté.
a
En disant
language
cela,
of liberty and resistance.
il ne faut pas avoir une seule seconde d'angélisme. La propagation du français
And
dans nos
disseminating
régions,
French
comme à travers le
throughout
monde,
our
dans
regions
nos
and throughout the
colonies,
world
s'est
through
faite aussi
our
par
colonies
contrainte.
was
Son
one
sacre s'est
of
aussi fait
constraint
contre
and
ses valeurs.
forced. It was
Mais la
one
grande
of
force
trying to
de
enforce its
ceux
values
auxquels
on the
on a
world.
imposé
But
cette langue, ce
the
fut
France at the time
d'adopter ces valeurs
was
et de les y
trying to
réussir.
have those
Ce
values
fut
brought to
souvent de
life
prendre à
around
leur
the
compte
world.
la langue des dominateurs
French
et la
was often
dominer à
seen
leur tour en
as
la
the language
possédant
of
et
those
la retourner
dominating,
en outil
but then
d'émancipation.
those who were dominated,
C'est la
they took the
métaphore
language
du
and
chemin
used it against those who had
C'est lui
dominated
le plus
them.
beau rapport à la langue et à la République.
That is what the
Enfant de
French
la
language is all
colonisation et
about.
de l'esclavage, émancipé par la République, qui se retourne contre
Slavery
l'Empire quand il
was
veut revenir
put
sur
an
la
end to
colonisation,
by
lui,
the French Republic
qui
in
reste fidèle à la
French.
vraie promesse de la France et de la République. Il est la métaphore de ce chemin de la langue,
The French
de la colonisation à la décolonisation.
language is
Car
so
en
unique in that it is
choisissant
the language
pour
of
langue de
both
leur
colonization
création
and decolonization.
artistique le français, ils abolissaient
French is a language of abolition.
Il l'annoblissait, il retournait l'humiliation en fierté.
It was a way to turn humiliation into power by Senghor, Césaire, Maria Maba, Marie Scondé, so many other writers who used the French language to break down the history of colonization and to see in it a new beauty. The French language is a language of decolonization, as said Senghor. So all of the great speeches of decolonization were thought of, written and pronounced, spoken in French. And there is the unique organization defending peace, freedom, democracy and values, spoken by presidents who weren't born into the French language. It was a sense of emancipation through French as a language. For the French speakers of the world nowadays, in fact, the current city with the most French speakers is no longer Paris, but Kinshasa. And that's why French is an international language. It is not just a language of France. There are more speakers of French outside French borders. 230 million men, women, and children around the world speaking French in dozens of countries across 5 continents, from Vanuatu to the Congo River to the Mississippi. Countless others have French words in their own languages. 5,000 words in Turkish, 30,000 words in English come from French. What fantastic tribute, or what better tribute could we pay than that? We have the perpetual secretary of the French Academy himself was not born in France, but yet is the highest defender of the French language. Hélène Carrère d'Ancos or Amin Malouf learned French at the age of 4 or at the age of 20 like François Cheng, and found in the French language a sense of hospitality and open doors to new worlds. A language heard in countless classrooms around Europe, a language of diplomacy. A language chosen by all others, by Beckett or Akira Musabayashi, to write their own literature works in what was for them a foreign language. Mylène Kundera, using French to throw off the yoke of their own oppression from their own language. It was a language used by people who wanted to say that they were part of a community, a part of a way of life, all through a single language. So universalism is something made possible through French. And Paul Valéry said that we need to focus on how unique French is and how universal French is. But yes, the French language is a language of alliances. It is what brought our hearts and minds together to reason and greatness. The French language has always been a language of minorities throughout the world. A language of minorities spoken in the East was always French, because French is a language of freedom. And that is why in Tehran, Damascus, in Cairo, in Beirut, Alexandria, people speak French. Free men and women speak French. It is a way of standing up against incomprehension. And that's what French as a language has always said to the world. Where people would have us withdraw, or people would pit religions against the Western world, or people would say that we cannot live together peacefully. The French language is a way of saying that despite these divisions, we can live together. And that is why Villers-Cotterets will be one of the key centers of the French language from today onwards. And in autumn of 2024, it will be the beating heart of the International Summit for Francophonia. The Francophone Summit, it's the reason that since 2018, students from Senegal have been able to travel the world. It is an organization that builds up discussion, exchanges. It is one of the largest international cultural networks with 350,000 euros in grants being given to countless people around the world. Since March 2018, 712 new French institutes around the world, 40,000 additional students learning French, two-thirds of whom are foreigners. It is that organization that the French language is being spread around the world, from Asia to the Caribbean Ocean. It's an organization that continues to invent, to have fun, to seek new ways of using our language. Some here probably don't know the word zibulateur. The younger students here probably know exactly what we're talking about. But words that are up here on the glass window are a sign that our language is changing. They may be surprising for some, but I don't want to give anything away. I don't want to give anything away, but this is a fine selection of what our language is and how much diversity there is in our language. We continue to meet between prime ministers, with the French and Canadian prime ministers. We continue to meet through the francophone networks, the libraries that we have, the French language book fairs that are constantly being held around the world are just a few minor examples of what the francophone world is. It's a place where we can celebrate the French language, create new works in the French language. It's a place where economic, literary, cultural people can come together. It's such a lifeblood that we can tap into. And I would like to thank the Secretary General of the Francophone Organization for organizing the next summit here in Villers-Cotterets. And it's through this organization that future generations will be able to be won over by the French language, choose it, so they can choose to see their words up on the wall. That is why French is so important, a language of universality, of liberty, of unity. Allow me to finish with just one final thought. This will be a place where we will pay great homage, a great tribute to 5 key figures who will continue to drive the universal nature of the French language. Teachers, authors, actors, librarians, and translators. These 5 key figures are those men and women who breathe life into French. It is thanks to them, and I'm sure you know, that French is a language that is taught through languages, some would say through its rules, some would say that it is too caught up and it is stuck, but these 5 people are the ones who free it. But yes, a language is to be learned, the spelling, grammar. It is thanks to these people that we know exactly how to use a comma and a full stop. To all French teachers, my thoughts go out to you. Just recently, a French teacher was murdered simply because he taught French as a language And in Arras, like in many other cities and towns around France, there are teachers teaching their students. Like Mr. Germain, that Albert Camus paid great tribute to, quite moving tribute to. All of these teachers who can share their enthusiasm, excitement for the French language. Bernard Pivot, Éric Corsena, with their work of beautiful grammar, Claude Agege, and countless others traveling through the French language. All of these men and women, they changed my life. They opened up my horizons to new continents because they enabled me to understand my world and the world around me. So I want this place to be for teachers so that they can bring their students in. So
you were listening to the French President Emmanuel Macron speaking at the inauguration of the French Language Cultural Institute, the facility, which is located in a stronghold of the far right's Marine Le Pen, aims to promote the French language here in France and right around the world. We can now bring in France 24's Clovis Casali, who was listening to that speech with me. Clovis, talk us through what exactly is this pet project of the French president?
Well, clearly it's a very personal project, and we've just been hearing the French president making it personal, paying tribute to all of those writers, those public figures in France who spent their lives promoting French language and helping, as Emmanuel Macron said, help the young Macron open his eyes to new continents, to new ideas. He was born and brought up in Amiens, not very far north of Villers-Cotterets, in a small inner town, not in the French capital. And he very much said that French language played an essential role for him in his upbringing, making him into the person he is today. And just like for everyone, French language built an identity. And final words on why it's so personal for Emmanuel Macron, also possibly. He married a French teacher, former French teacher, Brigitte Macron, who's, as a First Lady, spending a lot of time and energy promoting French language, also trying to reform schooling and the education system. She's not reforming herself, of course, but she's clearly giving advice, helping Emmanuel Macron, who's also always said that education and the defense of French language were essential in his mandate.
And you mentioned the First Lady, Brigitte Macron, because she was there. A lot of people within the government, including the Foreign Minister and the Education Minister.
Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna, Education Minister Gabriel Attal, as well as the Culture Minister Rima Abdul Malak. Why? Because this project, which is actually dubbed the greatest, the most important or ambitious, if you will, cultural project of the Macron presidency. Well, this is at the crossroads of different policies, fields, cultural, scientific, educational, of course. And what is this project exactly? It's basically going to be a residency for artists, for writers. It will be a celebration, as the French president said, of teachers, writers, actors, librarians, translators. It's basically not a museum, as he said. There will be exhibitions, but it will also be a lively venue, a cité, as we say in French, an institution where you'll have different projects. It's open to everyone, and there will be exhibitions, digital aspects also, of course, because it's going to be a modern venue. It will be open to all, and it will be a place where people can really learn about the evolution of French language, see where it's going, and also celebrate it in many different ways.
Clovis, you said this facility is not located in a big city. It's about 2 hours away from Paris.
Depending on the traffic.
Depending on the traffic. What's the significance of this location?
Yes, it's 80 kilometers north of Paris. Villers-Cotterets is in, let's say, a de-industrialized area, an impoverished area currently. It wasn't always the case, but where you have a high unemployment rate. And it's also a far-right bastion, if you will. The mayor of Villers-Cotterets is from the National Rally Party, far-right of Marine Le Pen. And the far-right candidate, has always recorded very high numbers of votes. She finished first in the first round and second round of the presidential election against Emmanuel Macron. So for Emmanuel Macron, it's also a way of saying, we're not abandoning these areas, we're bringing a lot of jobs, 150 local employees just for the building of this ambitious project, over 200 million euros invested to renovate a castle that was very much decrepit, a 16th century castle that's now been renovated, restored, and it's used for this institute, this international Cite Institute for the French language. So in a way, it's for Emmanuel Macron to say, okay, we're going to bring back jobs. We're going to try to attract visitors, create business. Surely that's going to happen. And also, in a way, tell the French far right and the nostalgic fringes of French society that Emmanuel Macron and the government are not abandoning French culture, language and tradition to the far right.
Emmanuel Macron did speak about, the use of French in different languages. He mentioned Turkish, he mentioned Persian. Did he have anything to say about what's going on in the world right now?
Well, actually, he did. He said that French language was the prime tool to ensure unity in the country. When people know the language, they can integrate better, they can use language for their own good, if you will. And also, at a time, he said, at such a critical time in the world. And of course, he was hinting at what's going on with this war between the Hamas and Israel, the risks in the region, this hatred on the rise, he was saying, with people trying to put one religion against another. While Emmanuel Macron said that French language was a prime tool, the best way to ensure unity, because French is not just spoken in France, it's spoken around the world. Actually, the largest number of people speaking a language in a country is in the Democratic Republic of Congo, not even in France. The largest francophone city is Kinshasa, not Paris. And regardless of your nationality, maybe of your political ideas, French language ensures unity and it helps overcome differences and hatred, and that was his message.
Thank you very much for that.
French language, any common language, and for him, for the French president, French language has always meant universality and common values of liberty, freedom and tolerance.
Thank you for that. Clovis Casali there.